meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town. Oh, the butcher and the baker and the people on the streets, where do they go? To meet the Mets! Oh, they're hollering and cheering and they're jumping in their seats. Where do they go? To meet the Mets! All the fans are true to the orange and blue, so hurry up and come on down, 'cause we got ourselves a ball club, the Mets of New York town.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to both channels right here, ready for a stream that is very unique to spring training and to channels alike and content creators, especially baseball content creators, because there's a lot to talk about with the Mets roster projections as we go into full squad workouts tomorrow, as today is pitchers and catchers. We had a lot of people there already, a lot of videos, a lot of social media going crazy with Edwin Diaz and everything else going on. And it is very interesting to see, as we'll say what's up to Chris in just a second, what exactly is available on the 26-man roster. You know, we'll take a quick look at the 40-man, understand exactly what players might have a shot to make this team. And there's a lot of what ifs that me and Chris were just talking about before the stream. And if you checked out Till Mets Do Us Part, they were talking about it a lot as well at the third base position that we'll definitely dive into as well. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
Oh man, this is going to be a huge rabbit hole that we're going to go down in this stream, giving you all the scenarios, all of the sort of what if competition scenarios that David Stearns has alluded to in his press conference. And we'll get into it. It's going to be, I want to say, we might go past an hour, but we need to if we're talking about this 26-man. It's going to be a fun stream, so I hope everyone enjoys. Tell your friends, tell your family. If they're not able to listen in live, make sure you point them in our direction. Yeah, Interstate Mets Report, great live show yesterday. We had Ibby, co-host of the Till Mets Do Us Part podcast, and Mets Trucker podcast, Baseball Tone, also appearing on our live stream. Go check that out. It's on my channel. It's on Amish Country Mets fans channel. Nelson, I know he's not here with us today, but yeah, great stuff. A lot of Mets content coming up, and we can smell that sweet smell of baseball in the air. So I love it. Let's get it.
Absolutely. And besides the 5 or 6 inches of snow I got in my area, yeah, it smells like spring. You know, by this time next week, next week will be 7 days before I head out to spring training. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I always like to do content out there. Just a little information out there that I'm going to tell you guys that when I get to Port St. Lucie, I'm going to get to Clover Park very early. The day of the day of the first game of spring training. I'll be out there just asking Met fans. I'm gonna do a video that I'm gonna post on my channel about asking Met fans their thoughts about the 2024 season and give their prediction for their win total and record for the season. So that's going to be a lot of fun, and I'll be going live during there as well. I'm trying to get in touch with Hayden as well to see if we can hang out, because I will be in the Daytona area, which is around where his school is. So we'll see if we can get there in with me and him as well. So, all right, before we get started with really diving deep into the rosters, Chris, I'm going to ask you, and there's a question on the screen already. How many roster spots do you really think are available, like legitimate roster spots? Like, give me a number from the 26-man roster. How many spots do you think are available? Besides, we're going to talk about later what positions are available and what spots are available on the roster. How many exactly do you think?
I think there's 4 roster spots available.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
there's 4 roster spots available. I think you can make a case for a 5 versus 6-man rotation to start up, um, which will have a heavy impact on what you do, not only on in your bullpen, but your bench. I think
Yeah.
there's a roster spot to be had as the last man on the bench, whether they're rolling with a 4-man bench or maybe even a 5-man bench. I think 4-man bench is most realistic right now, but we'll see. And then we'll see if they roll with anywhere between 7 to 9 bullpen guys. Usually the sweet spot is 8 bullpen guys, but like I said, that heavily depends on if you're going with 5 starters or 6 to start the season off. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and, I was thinking around 4 or 5, depending on the bullpen. There's only you're only allowed. I just realized that. I think Christian. I don't know if he's in the chat right now, but he even messaged me saying that you're only allowed 13 pitchers on your roster now. So that really kind of tells you there's probably going to be 8 bullpen arms available, and I think we'll talk about the players later, but I think there's a few guys that might actually not make the roster and might get cut during spring, or just might not win the job, especially in the long relief or middle relief as well, that we'll get into. So I think around 4 or 5. So I'm right on board with you there. I think it's going to lean toward a little bit more towards back end bench and back end bullpen as well. That's probably going to really decide a couple of roster spots. But David Stern spoke the other day, and I think he gave a couple of hints of what he's really looking at, because somebody did ask him uh, what roster spots seem to be available, what positions seem to be available. He talked a little bit about DH, that he didn't really necessarily say Vientos, that's his job. And we'll get into it. We'll dive deep into that a little bit, depending on third base. But he also spoke about the bullpen as well, and a little bit about the bench. And we kind of, focused in on that, Chris. So I want to give you your thoughts quickly about David Stern before we get really into the roster, going deep into that conversation. What did you think about the David Stern conversation? Did you feel like he was kind of like trying to like give a little bit of a boast of confidence to this roster and to what he put together to the fan base? Or do you think he really believes that this roster can do something in the first half of the season?
No, yeah. I mean, are you alluding to the fact about the competition or?
Just in general, like, yeah, with that, the competition, and just in general about his speech, like when he kept on talking about, he believes his team's a playoff team, a competitive team, and all that fun stuff that he talked about.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's been consistent. A lot of people have said this already. He's been consistent ever since the start, ever since he took over. He's stressed the importance of pitching, right? He's severely changed the way this bullpen and this rotation is looking with the sort of absence after that trade deadline of Verlander and Scherzer. And obviously the latest news on them isn't good within itself as well. So Mets fans are, we're kind of lucky things played out the way they did. Hope they get back on the field as soon as possible. But, to get back onto it, yeah, absolutely. I think that this roster, has the makings of a wild card team. I'm not going to sit
Yes.
here and sell anybody, and Mets fans, and we've been saying it all off season long. Like, this roster really does have the makings of a wild card team. They're not going to go win your division, and it's a wait and see game for the first half of the season, depending on which will severely influence whether you're a buyer or a seller at the deadline. But yeah, anything that David Stearns has been saying, I don't think it's smoke in terms of how this team, how he looks for them to succeed. But I do think there is a little smoke going on with the sort of competition that's at play, predominantly at third base. And I know that we'll get into it, but he did mention sort of the competition there. Carlos Mendoza, same thing, mentioning the competition at third base between the guys that are available, Vientos, Beatty, Wendell. I know we'll get into that, but also I wanted to sort of shed light on the fact that the way this rotation might shake out, whether you're going with a 6-man rotation or a spot starter to begin the season, is going to have an impact on who you put in that bullpen. So he mentioned getting Kodai Senga that extended continued rest. I'm not sure if he means right out the gate to preserve him for the latter half of the season, or maybe giving him that bulk workload at the beginning of the season and sort of maybe spreading it out toward the end. That scenario that I just mentioned second doesn't make too much sense to me. I would think they'd give him more time to adjust out the gate and then kind of hone in on a lot more innings and every fifth day for him, maybe sometime middle of the season. So that is something that I took away. And then also, lastly, the Starling Marte situation, right? He says he's fully healthy. There's no concerns with Marte. There was a lot of concerns with Marte in 2023, so we'll see if that remains true. But this is a guy that we've been saying all offseason long. He's an X factor for this Mets team. We've seen 2 seasons under contract from Starling Marte with the New York Mets, and they've been polar opposite seasons.
Yep.
So which version will we get this season? So we'll see. A lot of different scenarios at play, but I think David Stearns, like I said, corporate answers as usual. He's not going to throw anybody under the bus. He's going to leave it up to interpretation, and that's exactly what he should do as the president of baseball operations in his first season, right?
Yeah.
So, like I said, I didn't really learn too much from the Mendoza and the Stearns pressers, but we are here to talk about what he said with a grain of salt, and we'll make those caveats here in just a second.
Yeah, and you know what? I think he was truthful in saying, he even said it. He goes, this is my first year. A lot of president of baseball ops GM's first year. It's a lot of evaluation mode, no matter what part of where the fans think they actually are as an organization. He can't just go in there and make 30 moves and just be like, oh, I don't care about nothing. This is a guy that knows how to develop a farm system, knows how to work a pitching staff. No, he knows, he comes with a winning philosophy, even though it didn't pan out well for the Brewers in the playoffs. He's got his team to the playoffs a lot, and I think that's very interesting to see. But you brought up Carlos Mendoza, and I did like that he talked about competition. I did like that he talked about when he was talking about how he's going to try to get to know these players and understand how to put them in the best position to win. And I think look, he didn't give a lot of great there wasn't a lot of great questions, and I think Carlos Mendoza was willing to say, and you even brought this up on I believe it was on X, you brought it up where you said the questions were really bad, and I think Carlos Mendoza was willing to say more. But why say more when you didn't really get answered? Ask the question that can bring more out of you. I think that was the big problem with that press conference, because the reporters did a good job with David Stearns asking him the tough questions. With Carlos Mendoza, they kind of gave him a softball over there. Like they really kind of eased him into it, which I appreciate from the reporters, but I think Met fans wanted more from Carlos Mendoza, and for a first-time manager, I think it's good for him that they didn't really go after him like they did with David Stearns with the really, really tough questions, because I want him to ease into it. I want him to focus on the team and what he needs to do, building a relationship with these guys. But I do think that David Stearns was very truthful about Alonso, about competition, and about his belief and the organization belief of what this team can be. Competitive playoff team. That's what they believe. And again, playoff team can mean a lot of things. Could mean division, could mean wild card. I think they're probably leaning towards the wild card. But, if a couple of things, look, the Mets don't need 7 or 8 things to go right. They need a healthy rotation and guys to bounce back in their lineup. Because I'm not worried about the bullpen, to be honest with you, as we'll dive into it in a second. I think if the rotation stays predominantly, for the most part, healthy, and the lineup and the guys that you brought up, Marte, Alonso, get that average up. McNeil, get that average up. Lindor, get that average up. You're talking about a lineup that if they play the back of their baseball cards, you're in a good spot. And, you can easily be a couple of games over 500, which is going to put you right in the mix in the back end of the wild card for either the second or third wild card spot. The last 2 seasons, it was between 84 and 87 wins that got you a wild card spot. And I think the Mets can get there. You have a really good month, as I talked about many times on my channel. You're going to be right there in the mix. And again, first half is important, Chris.
Can I just clarify something here for people in the chat?
Yeah.
We're not trying to sit here and sell you all that the Mets are definitively 100% going to be a playoff team. All we're saying is that the Mets are going to put themselves in the talk when the standings come out, down that stretch in September, that they will be in the conversation of being one of those wild card teams, right? We know how the standings in the East are going to shake out, right? And we know who the wild card teams essentially are going to be. You'll probably have a mix of Philly Arizona, and then whoever is up for grabs at that third wild card spot. We're not selling you that we are 100% going to be a playoff team. All we're saying is that with the offseason additions that the Mets have made, whether you want to believe it personally yourself or not, that's up to you. All we're saying is that with 82, 83, and even 84 wins that Pacoda projections have projected the Mets, that puts them automatically in the realm of competition. And Joel is right. There is a little bit of a gray area there, but we all know this team is a gray area going into 2024. We're sitting here telling you we're not 100% positive this team is going to make the playoffs. All we know is that they are going to compete for that playoff spot. And compete means make it respectable, be in striking distance, especially at the trade deadline, enough so to convince this front office to be buyers at the trade deadline with all the reports that we've been hearing. Andy Martino and everybody else saying the Mets are reserving this excess of money to see where this team's at the trade deadline and evaluate them. That's all we're saying. So if you're sitting here and telling us, oh, you know, we're guaranteeing a playoff, we're not guaranteeing a playoff appearance.
No.
We can't confidently say that. So
Yeah.
I just want to make that caveat out there because I think there's a lot of confusion about that still.
Exactly, and that's a great point because we're not saying that, but we're trying to actually understand the roster and what could get us to that point. You know, the Padres thought they were a playoff team, right? Their roster, a lot of people believe, were better than the Mets. They didn't make the playoffs either. You know, and I just said that in the chat. There's a lot of teams in the National League that are right in the middle of the pack with the Mets. You know, besides the Braves and the Dodgers, what other dominant team is in the National League or very good team, right? I think the Phillies are taking a step back. It's very hard to go to the World Series and lose the way they did in the World Series and then go to the NLCS thinking that they were just going to run through the Diamondbacks and get beat up, embarrassed in game 6 and 7 in the NLCS, you know, and they haven't done anything. They brought back one of their starters. They really haven't done much to change that team. And, you know, at some point it gets stale. You know, you get to a certain point, you know, the World Series, NLCS, you know, why can't they have a few wins less? If they have a few wins less, and that can change everything in the NL East, not for the division, but for the playoff spot. You know, the NL Central, I don't think is very good. You know, the Brewers lost Burns. The Cubs lost Stroman. You know, they did get Imanaga, but who knows about him? They haven't really done nothing. Maybe they'll bring back Bellinger. Who knows? But they really haven't done anything. So the Central is kind of like a mid-division team where they're probably between 80 and 84 to 85 wins. Somebody's going to win that division with probably 85 wins. And that means less wins are going to be second and third place, probably where the Mets are. And then the West, besides the Dodgers, you know, the Padres, who lost Juan Soto and probably Blake Snell, are they going to be around the 82, 83, 84 win mark? Probably, because that's where they were last year. And, you know, the Diamondbacks, I don't think a lot of people believe that the Diamondbacks are very good. They're probably solid, but, you know, they are in a tough division where they can lose a lot of games as well during the season, and they're in the same win total that the Mets are in, around the 80 to 84 wins. So the Mets can easily be a second and third wild card by just being a solid team, an above average team, which most teams in the National League are probably in that range. But what gets us to the playoffs? And what is it? It's the roster that we're going to talk about right now. And it's going to be important to realize why this roster is going to be so important going forward, especially the back part of the roster. You know, everybody can talk about the 26th guy on the roster that might not mean nothing, but it might, because look at the roster possibilities. And let me just move the scroll down there. I apologize for that. You know, I didn't really take guys that are on the 40-man, and I think David Peterson is going to go on the 60 days, so he's going to get knocked off the 40-man roster. So there's another person that can be added if it's another bat that they sign, or somebody else that's not on the 40-man. I think Luisano Acuna is the only one on the 40-man. Drew Smith and Jet Williams is not. So that's something that we can look at as well, that maybe Acuna.
Drew Gilbert.
That's right. Yeah. So those two guys, you know, are a possibility depending on if there's any injuries or anything like that. Now, the projected lineups, projected rotation, projected bullpen, the bench is probably kind of where it's at, depending on who we choose at the possibilities at the bottom. But the lineup, the order doesn't matter at this point. It's just a matter of right now with the current roster, is this the lineup that we're going to see? Depending on the order, who knows? But Chris, looking at the start with the projected lineup, without another bat that the Mets sign, do you think this is probably the lineup you'll see on opening day? Not the order, but just the lineup 1 through 9.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. That's there's nothing else that you can do in there to make, me satisfied. And there's no other reasons that I can see of pulling any name out of there at this current moment. I think the main thing here that we have to talk about is the outfield set. We know that.
Mhm.
The main thing that we have to talk about is one, whether there's an injury somewhere in spring training. That's one. We'll get to that. I mean, obviously we can't project that right here, right now. By the way, this screen looks beautiful. I'm sorry. I hope everyone on the chat
I
appreciates
tried
it
to fit
because
in so many names. I kept on
yeah,
changing
and this is
fonts.
perfect because this is the 40 man in a nutshell, minus probably Phil Bickford. It's not the 40 man because Drew Gilbert's not part of it, right? And
Yeah,
and
there's a couple
you
of
know,
them that are not in
but
the
like
40 minutes that I
Phil
think that
Bickford and
could make the roster depending on cuts and all that.
right. But anyways, back to the whole point. I just wanted to just let the chat acknowledge the beautiness of this screen right here. It gets me excited. Um, the main point with the lineup here is that Vientos and Beatty. There's been a lot of conversation lately, especially
Mhm.
with the pressers, Stearns and Mendoza pressers, of this competition that's going to happen supposedly at third base. And we've mentioned this on our streams here before, right? We've mentioned this throughout the whole entire offseason, predominantly the last couple of months, about is there really going to be competition at third base? Or is that just smoke? Right? Because we
Yeah,
obviously are in a spot in a position to say, hey, listen, maybe Brett Beatty doesn't really deserve flat out to have that position given to him. Because let's face it, he didn't do enough last season at all. But with the roster flexibility that we have and the guys on the bench, or lack of flexibility that I'm talking about. There's a lack of flexibility. They might not have any like serious option to make that a competition unless they bring in a guy like someone was saying Gio Urshela, maybe a guy like JD Martinez or any other DH on the market for that matter, which I am not really projecting, and we can talk about that here in just a second. I think the Mets are done, but unless that happens, there really can't be a competition at third base because who's going to be your DH at that point when Mark Vientos is at third base? Are you really going to commit to DJ Stewart being that full-time
yeah.
DH to open up the season? And I think the answer is clearly no. So when we talk about a competition at third base, it's not whether or not, or it's not whether who deserves it more over the other. It's that you now open up an immediate hole in this lineup being the DH, and who's going to backfill that consistently?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't change anything here with the projected lineup.
Well, yeah. See, that's the problem because, like, if there is competition at third base and they're truly think that there can be competition at third base because they didn't talk about Beatty at third base. They didn't really talk about third base, but they talked about competition and they brought up Vientos' name. And I think Vientos is probably the best DH option as of right now with the roster. But if there is competition at third base and Vientos plays better defensively, because I think the bat can be better than Brett Beatty if
Oh
he
yeah,
plays
easy.
every day. It's
Yep.
about because both of them haven't shown anything defensively at all. And if Vientos, who's been, we've seen a ton of content of Vientos working out with Lindor and just working out defensively a lot. Now, Brett Beatty's probably working out. I think they're really trying to push that narrative with Vientos, being a guy that could be a versatile guy at third at first base as well. But if Vientos wins that third base job for whatever reason, he just looks better than Brett Beatty. That changes the bench. That changes the roster in general for opening day because you just talked about versatility. If Vientos wins the third base job, where is Brett Beatty? How can you put him on this roster? You're not going to sit him on the bench.
Nope.
What do you have to do? You're either gonna trade him, but that's not gonna help you because his value is gonna be shot, especially if he don't win that job. And if you're sending him to the minor leagues, he has nothing to prove in the minor leagues anymore. So he's
Zero.
basically a waste of a roster spot. And now your DH spot is basically terrible. Like, do you trust DJ Stewart? Nobody trusts Tyrone Taylor to be a DH. Navarez can't be a DH because he's your catcher, backup catcher, and Joey Wendell's your versatility guy around the infield. So unless the Mets, and we were just talking about this before we came on, we're not going to know about this third base competition until probably mid-March when these guys are playing every day. And I'm assuming they're going to be swapping Beatty and Vientos at third base for a lot of the games, a couple of split squad games here and there. But what happens if Vientos wins his third base job? Like, are the Mets praying that there's one of those bats available, a Rosario, a Belt, a Martinez still available by mid-March? And then they're like, well, Vientos won the job. Let's just get one of those bats, and they're going to be the DH. Because that's something to talk about if Vientos finds a way to win that third base job.
And that's why I don't buy into this being a competition whatsoever. That's why I think that not only, like, I would love this to be a competition. That'd be great. But the way the roster is right now, and who's on the 40-man right now, you can't make this a competition. You can't sit here and tell us to our faces as Mets fans that this is a competition unless you go sign another bat. Unless you go sign one of Brandon Belt, Eddie Rosario, or even JD Martinez. You cannot sit here and convince us as Met fans that this is a serious competition. Now, I'm not saying that Mark Vientos isn't going to play any third base at all. He's probably going to fill in at third base sporadically throughout the season. All I'm saying is right now, you cannot send him back to AAA. You just said it. He has nothing to prove there, and that's not going to help his trade value at all. He's 24 years old. So you're not going to send him back to AAA. Are you going to trade him after a down spring? You'd have to trade him like right now and just hope that somebody is willing to take that bait and see his progression. You'd have to take that trade right now, but that's not going to happen either. So you have to bring in somebody that can be that DH, but also can also sit on your bench and be productive on your bench. JD Martinez fits that bill, and I'll tell you why. JD Martinez, at this point in his career, he don't play 162 games. He don't play 150 games. He don't play 140 games. He plays anywhere between 100 and 115 games if you're lucky. That's a guy you can basically, in NBA terms, have a load management type season, plug and play when he's feeling good, and platoon for your DH with Mark Vientos. Same thing applies for Eddie Rosario, but Eddie Rosario is gives you a lot more flexibility because you can have him then as a fifth outfielder and just option DJ Stewart back to the minor leagues. That is a lot more productive than sitting here and telling me that we have an actual competition on our hands, but if Mark Vientos wins the job, Brett Beatty is just going to be rotting on the bench at 24 years old, still having everything to prove in the world. No trade value. Can't get him back to AAA. That's not going to happen. I can promise you. The Mets are not that naive. So there's a lot of things and external factors even though I think the Mets are done, if they are not by some miracle, you can potentially see one of those DH options come in and that will spark that competition that we are talking about. But unless that happens, if it doesn't happen, there cannot be competition. No matter how much we want it, there just can't be.
Yeah, there might be competition in the bullpen. There might be a competition for one spot on the bench. Maybe the DJ Stewart situation. Maybe somebody from the minor. What if a guy like Drew Gilbert, really does perform, and they find a way to put him on the 40-man and make the team. Can he win a job? Right? If Marte doesn't look healthy or Bader doesn't look healthy, he doesn't look good, can Drew Gilbert win the job? Because I think he's right on the precipice of making a major league roster. I think it's a long shot, but you just never know with injuries and somebody performing well above what people expect them to in spring training. But yeah, and that's the thing. And I was looking at my crystal ball, right? My Alexa. my crystal ball here, right? I feel like the Mets are going to get one of these bats. And the only reason why I say that, because if they keep on preaching about competition and they really haven't pinpointed what the competition is, because you can't tell me Vientos and DJ Stewart is a competition at DH. There's no contest, right? DJ Stewart can't hit lefties. We saw Vientos can hit both. He was better against right-handed than against left-handed. You brought that on the other hot stove about, I think it was a week ago. So it's not like Vientos is worse, just a left-handed. When the left-hander's on the mound, he'll be on at bat because he was better against right-handers. So there's no competition there. He wasn't specific in competition, and I think that was smart of David Stearns, because he leaves us as content creators a lot of outside opinions and what we think could happen, because I still say this. I think Martinez is going to fall into our laps, and this solves the problem, because now there's competition at third base. Now whoever doesn't win that job is going to the minor leagues, believe it or not. If it's going to hurt the player or not, look, you can't just keep on waiting and if you don't get another bet, and they really do believe Vientos is the DH and Brett Beatty is the third baseman, and that's where they're going to roll and open today, fine. But there's a short leash for both of these guys, because there's a couple of guys in the minors that can do the job, or at least give them an opportunity to do the job. But it is going to be very interesting to see, because if the Mets do sign another bat, it tells you that competition at third base is where they're going. And whoever wins this job is going to be the third baseman, and that guy is going to be somewhere in AAA, unfortunately.
And like you said, I think that we can all agree that Mark Vientos' bat is better than Brett Beatty's, and will probably be better by barring some miracle in 2024, just like from the power metric standpoint, right? Obviously, he strikes out a lot more, but there's a lot left to be desired with Brett Beatty's power. Like it's lacking, just put it simply. So if you are higher on Mark Vientos, which I get the feeling a lot of people are right now in terms of how much we've been seeing of him, obviously we've been seeing Mark Vientos being posted a lot more from the social media accounts, which honestly I don't take seriously at all. I don't think that means anything, but nonetheless, a lot of people like to make that a talking point. Signing a DH, really, if you believe Vientos is that guy, really doesn't do it. Like JD Martinez, that would be awesome. That doesn't take away Mark Vientos' at bats at all, because a lot of people who have been against signing a DH were like, "Well, I don't want Mark Vientos to get his at bats taken away." Well, he won't, because that means he would win that third base job, right? I personally don't think Vientos is playing third base. I don't think he's going to win that job. Defensively alone, I don't think he's going to do it. But for the Vientos truthers out there, which there seems to be a lot of, and Tone is in the chat saying Vientos is his third baseman, I know he believes firmly in that. If that's the case, then he can win that job, but we need a DH to fill in, because it ain't going to be DJ Stewart. So, you know what I mean?
You know what? You know why a lot of people are on board with Vientos? Because there's no other option. That's why. They don't give us a lot of options here. Who'd you rather have, Vientos or DJ Stewart? People believe DJ Stewart because of his power. Vientos because of his power. DJ Stewart showed some glimpses last year, but I don't see him as that guy. I see him as a guy that can get spot starts here and there, come off the bench in late in games within that bat. That's about it. But that's why you got Tyrone Taylor. Tyrone Taylor is going to come in the game defensively late in the game, probably for Starlin Marte defensively. So that means DJ Stewart is going to be a bat off the bench late in the game when they need, maybe a left-hander to come in for an at-bat. But yeah, that's the problem. Like, I don't think I don't think a lot of people that are saying Vientos is confident in Vientos. I think because the other choices of a DH are subpar at best. Not saying, look, I like the bench the way it is. I think this is pretty solid. You got versatile guys. You got two outfielders. You got your backup catcher, and you got a versatile infielder. I like the bench. But there's no other option than Vientos. Unless somebody shows up, from the minor league system that proves that they can be a great bat. But even that, I still think because there's no other option, the confidence for Vientos is probably low. But because there's no other options, people are saying Vientos because there is no other person that you feel any confidence in to say every day can be the everyday DH. Vientos could be that guy, and I think that's why the confidence level for Vientos is kind of high because there's no other person to choose from. I guarantee you, if Eddie Rosario, Belt, or Martinez is on this team, people will shift towards that person than Vientos real quick. But right
But I
now,
think
there ain't no other person on the roster.
I have seen a lot of people, and Tone is one of them. Shout out to him because he did appear on the Interstate Mets Report yesterday, and I love his content. So make sure you go check that out. Mets Trucker Podcast on YouTube. There are people within his fan base though, with the amount of times that he's been getting posted, working with Lindor, all of that. There are people that think that Vientos will play a lot more games at third base than expected because, to be fair to those people, Brett Baty also didn't show a strong glove at third base last season.
Yeah.
He didn't. Do I still think he's the better fielder? Absolutely. But yeah, there are a lot of people, to be fair, that they do believe in Vientos. They believe in his bat, but they believe that he can also play third base and win that position over Baty. I simply don't see it happening. And like I said, whether he wins it with his performance or not, the way this roster shakes out, I've said this 3 times already on this live. I just simply can't see a Tyrone Taylor, who has sneaky pop to his bat, by the way, as well, or DJ Stewart be that everyday DH. Daniel's saying it in the chat over here as well. He's got one good month to his name, DJ Stewart. I'm not writing him off. I think he can probably continue to produce some power, but you can't bank on that right away.
Yeah.
So unless you go sign a Brandon Belt, like Jeff was saying in the comments here, he can be a good fallback guy. DH option, hit 19 home runs, 855 OPS last season, and can be your backup first baseman if Pete Alonso needs a day off or he goes to DH. It just can't happen. But anyways, I digress. Before I say it like 10 more times, if there is true competition, we will see shortly who wins that job. Neither of these guys are solid defensively. One went to go work with Lindor. The other one didn't. One's been getting posted all over social media in his workouts. One hasn't. He's kept quiet outside of one social media post that he posted on Instagram, being Brett Baty. Mm-hmm. So there seems to be a side. Like Mets fan base, this fan base are seeming to take sides now of who they believe in more. Personally, if you had to ask me, before we move on to, the rotation, etc., I think both of these guys could find their way out of this organization in 2025 with how this roster is going to shake out and look, and the pitching that's going to need help.
Yep.
And if you want to upgrade offensively, if you don't truly believe in these guys, right, what is it going to take? And this is to you, Rob. Chat, please answer this as well. Want to get you guys involved? Absolutely. Appreciate you being here. Hit that thumbs up, by the way. I don't think we said that. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't. What is it going to take for us to be convinced that either of these guys could be long-term options for us moving forward? It's going to take a lot. And are they going to really live up to that?
That's the problem. Like if the Mets don't get another bat, both of these guys are going to be in a lineup. So, I mean, they're either going to be serviceable, do well, or just be plain bad. And I don't think they're going to have a very long leash. Honestly, I think if they have a bad April, you could see somebody like Acuna or, another person take a spot. Honestly, to be honest. But what would it take? Are you talking about spring training or in the regular season? Because that's like 2 different answers. Because like if both of them perform well,
in the regular season.
Well, see, at the regular season, I think you're gonna have to just deal with it. Whatever you get from them, to be honest with you. Would I like both of them to bat 250 and hit 20 home runs apiece? Yeah. I mean, I think that would help that lineup tremendously. But do I think Vientos can hit 20 home runs? Average wise, I don't know. I think his strikeouts are a little concerning to me. Brett Baty, it seems like every time every other at bat, he hits a ground ball to second base. So, which is weird because in the minors, I was at spring training games a lot for the last couple of years. The guy drives the ball. He's a gap-to-gap hitter. And I just don't understand at the major league level why he's hitting ground balls when he's a guy that consistently is a gap-to-gap hitter. Like he's a guy that spreads the ball all over the outfield. And he just doesn't do it at the major league level. If during the season, I think you have to take what you get from either of these guys if you don't bring in another bat, because where else you going until May, middle of May? Like, I'm assuming they're going to give these guys at least a month and a half to get going. I don't think, 2 weeks into April, if one of these guys or both of these guys are struggling, they're going to make changes. I mean, they can make a change to the DH spot quickly, say put DJ Stewart there, or, put Joey Wendell at third base. But that's not going to change the offense much at all. So, in my opinion, the middle of May is probably when you're going to really have an understanding of where these guys are at in the first, 35, 40 games of the season. And then you can make a decision on, all right, somebody's got to go to the minor leagues and you got to bring somebody else up and give them a chance. But, that's playing with fire there, to be honest with you. I can't really give you a number because, you're not really going to know how they're going to be during the season until you see their numbers, at least in the first half. And if they're playing well, then you don't have really anything to talk about except great, they're doing well. The kids are helping us, and that's about it. But what do you think, Chris? Since you brought up the question, like what do you want to see, at least in April? Because I think they'll get at least a month from these guys, either offensively or defensively. Going into the regular season.
I mean, well, when you talk about a short leash, I mean, if they don't do well in April, like you're saying, who would come up and be that DH though?
That's the thing. Would you put DJ Stewart in the DH spot and then bring somebody, maybe a veteran guy or somebody that's been in the minor league for a while on the bench like that? Because you can't bring up Acuna and sit him on the bench.
That's why I don't think they're going to get a short leash. That's why I don't think they're on a short leash, to be honest with you, because there's not many other options to bring up and be the DH.
You know what? I think we both answered our own question. I think they're going to be on the roster, and then if they fail, they fail. Maybe they'll get a couple of days off, and they'll put somebody else in their spot. If Beatty's bad, put Vientos at third, or Joey Wendell at third, and just pray for good defense, really good defense, and maybe he'll run into one every now and then. Because if you're going to give these guys 2 or 3 months, then, regardless of what they're going to do, they're going to be on the roster. Either they're going to be sitting on the bench and somebody on the bench is going to be playing for them, or they're going to be, platooning. And the platoon, I don't think works at all, to be honest with you, especially at DH or at third base, because I've said this forever. And you've heard it many times, Chris. And I know a lot of people in the chat probably hate me for saying this every single time. But I go back to Vogelback when they played the Brewers in 2022. He had an outstanding series against the Brewers. Was raking home runs, RBIs, just beating up the ball. They go to Oakland right after that. They start 4 lefties in a row. Vogelback had 4 at-bats in that series. For a guy who is red hot, you couldn't put him in the lineup because he couldn't hit lefties. And you put God knows what in a DH spot. And it just doesn't work. Because when a guy is red hot, you can't take him out of the lineup because he can't hit a particular pitcher. And the platoon's not going to work. So if you're going to give him a couple of months and they don't have a short leash, what you're saying, then take what you can get from these guys. And whatever your 26-man roster is, you're just going to have to swap them. If Vientos is not doing well at DH, well, guess what? Tyrone Taylor's your only outfield backup. DJ Stewart is your DH, and then hopefully Beatty is doing well, but if Beatty's not doing well, now you're already using your bench to start in your lineup, which is going to make it worse offensively. And now you're going to have 2 kids in Beatty and Vientos who you don't want to keep on the bench because, well, they're kids and it usually doesn't work out keeping them on the bench and getting them spot starts here and there. Is Stearns going to demand they play regardless of their performance offensively?
I think so. I honestly think that. And I know a lot of people aren't happy about that and I really do think this circles back to how serious are the Mets about competing, because obviously the eggs are all in the basket right now for this 2024 season with Brett Baty and Mark Vientos. All signs point to that unless they go sign a bat. If they sign a bat, let's say JD Martinez or anybody else, if they go sign another bat between now and the start of spring training, then that changes. That narrative changes. But until they do that, which I'm not confident in, all of the eggs in 2024 offensively, right, are Vientos and Beatty, because we know we're going to get out of the top four. This is a top heavy lineup.
Yeah.
But the success is really going to be measured in 2024 by what the bottom of the order does. That is Starling Marte, unless he hits two, depends. That is Mark Vientos, and that is Brett Baty. And I'm not including Bader in that, which I'll get to here in a second because the chat's making a good point here. I don't care about Harrison Bader. I already know I'm not expecting much offensively from him.
No.
So that you are putting your eggs in the basket of 2024 with Mark Vientos and Brett Baty. And that's why I don't think they're going to have a short leash, because are you really going to take away the developmental factor, which is what we've been set up for to see all offseason long? Are you really going to take away that developmental factor if they have a bad month of April or a bad, let's say, month of April and May? Are you really going to go and put Tyrone Taylor, DJ Stewart in there and just forget about them? I don't think Stearns is going to do that.
Yeah,
So.
and Easy brought up a good point. Stearns did say, he expects the young guys to struggle, but Brett Baty has had a year under his belt. Yes, last year with some injuries, and he had about a year and like a month of proving himself. And Vientos had last year to get opportunities where he showed some good, showed some bad. But I'm kind of, you see, that's the problem, because like I just don't know what's I just I don't know, because it's frustrating now, because like, yeah, give the kids a shot, but again, you can't preach competition, and for the guys that don't do well, you have to replace them with somebody, because you can't just have Vientos go through a 0 for 20 and just keep on rolling them out there. Like, things are going to change. Yeah, he might run into one and then he's back and then go do another 1 for 10 stretch. And I think that's the issue that we're having right now, as Chris walked away for a second. But yeah, Easy, I understand that. But it's really interesting to think, because Harrison Bader, I'm not thinking much. He's a guy that could be a little bit of a guy that can work counts, get that pitch count up for a pitcher in the back end of the lineup. But yeah, the lineup is top heavy once again. Now, Alvarez and Marte is a wild card here, because if Alvarez can get that average up a little bit and show that power that he's shown last year, yeah, he could be very good for us. And now, instead of 1 through 4, we're 1 through 5. And if Marte shows any glimpse of being Marte of 2022, even 50% of 2022, now you only have to worry about 7 through 9. And I think that's a lot more tolerable. But you can't have a 7 through 9 that is absolutely dog shit, because you're not going to do anything. Honestly, Chris.
My last question is, because we've been talking about offense and Brett Baty and Mark Vientos before we get into pitching. My last question here is, if we want to mitigate the lack of offense with Harrison Bader, I know we've been talking about ever since we signed him, ever since we've been hearing about the smoke of Brandon Nimmo moving to left field and Brett Baty and the run prevention, etc. Are we convinced that Harrison Bader is going to start? And that brings in my next question of,
okay,
why would Luis Angel Acuna, there's a lot of factors that might go into this from the front office perspective, but why would Luis Angel Acuna be on the 40-man and, let's say, not a Jet Williams or not a Drew Gilbert? Unless there's something that I'm not picking up on why he would be on the 40-man over those guys, or even a guy like Zach Short, more so Luis Angel Acuna. The only other thing I can think of here in terms of changing the projected offensive metrics, the offensive lineup, and the bench is to have a guy like Luis Angel Acuna somehow, some way, and I'm not saying this is likely, but somehow, some way, make that opening day lineup and push Harrison Bader to the bench and have Brandon Nimmo be your starting center fielder and try to sort of mitigate the lack of offense with Harrison Bader for Luis Angel Acuna. Listen, I don't think Luis Angel Acuna is going to be on the opening day roster, but that is literally, quite literally, the only chance that we see anything different in terms of this projected lineup and projected bench on your screen. That is the only way that I can see something different. I don't see with our current outfield, maybe a Drew Gilbert cracks it, but I and that is surrounding DJ Stewart, because you'd have to knock off DJ Stewart in order to make that happen. You'd knock off DJ Stewart, move Harrison Bader to your projected bench, and then slot in a Luis Angel Acuna or a Drew Gilbert, because if it's Luis Angel Acuna, you'd have to move Jeff McNeil to left field.
Left field. I was just
You know
going
what
to
I
ask you
mean?
that.
Yeah, you'd have to move Jeff McNeil to left field.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
if it's Drew Gilbert, you do a 1-for-1 swap.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, but I see, this is what I don't understand. Like, you get Bader for defensive purposes. He's not very good offensively. And right now, at the moment, Gilbert's not on the 40-man. So, could he be on the 40-man by the time they put Peterson on the 60-day IL? Yeah, could be. But it's going to be very interesting, because I don't see them knocking off DJ Stewart to put Harrison Bader on the bench, because you kind of have Bader and Stewart. Bader and Taylor on your bench. I guess Taylor could be your bat off the bench, but then you don't have you have Joey Wendell as your only lefty on the bench, and I don't know if they want to lose that versatility on the bench. But, they could do that. If Bader doesn't, but again, Bader's not a young guy. If he doesn't look good or he gets injured, they have to make the move. We're putting Nimmo back to center, McNeil to left field, and they have to put a second baseman up there, which will be Acuna. Who else is there? Is it Joey Wendell? Are they really going to do
Williams
that?
In there, maybe. You can put Jet Williams in there, maybe.
Well, he would have to be on the 40-man, right? You have to put him on the 40-man.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. So are we really committed to Harrison Bader just strictly because of the defense? He hasn't shown anything offensively, definitely not last season. And for the majority of his career, are we just okay with just being that sort of turnover? Like, just hope he gets on base to flip the lineup over because he plays good defense? Understand his defense is a strong suit, but we're asking the general question here. Like I said, we're posing this stream not in the terms of like probability of it happening, but exploring all the options that the front office would have to think about given what happens in spring training. If Bader goes and stinks it up, maybe even gets injured, who knows? He is injury prone. What would happen and who would fill in that outfield spot? Would you have a Tyrone Taylor just starting there every day? I don't think so. I don't think so, because I think
he brings a little bit more dynamic to the lineup, though, because he does have a little bit of pop. The average is not great, but he can knock one over the wall, where I don't think a guy like Bader does much. Bader is actually clutch in a lot of spots. Like, he was clutch for the Yankees. Like, he was their best postseason guy. He was one of the guys that came up in big spots and did get hits, even though his offense is not very good. He does work the count a lot. So that's good. I guess that's what they're looking at as well. But yeah, if they do a Tyrone Taylor for Bader switch in the lineup, then Taylor with the speed, in the 9 spot works out well as well. So I think that swap can happen very easily. Because I think Bader and Taylor, speed wise, I think Taylor's a lot better speed wise. But I put Bader in a 9 hole because I think he can provide a little bit more versatility when it comes to working counts, where Tyrone Taylor strikes out a little bit more, but provides that power. So I guess you can make that 1-for-1 swap, and then it kind of solves that issue. But I think I'm sorry.
No, MAZ makes a great point. They're saying that the Mets gave Bader $10 million, and that's why he's going to say, he said it's going to take a long time for him to fail for the team to pull the plug. And I absolutely agree with that, given what he's making. But that was a conscious decision the Mets made when giving him that contract, and that's fine if they value that defense. All I'm saying here is that while we're talking about the offense, that's really the only other move that I can see as of right now, is having one of those prospects. If you want to get him in the door, if you want to just sort of see what they got and they kill it in spring training, you can have Luis Angel Acuna come up, play second base, you bump Bader out. DJ Stewart would be the odd man out on the bench, and then you just roll with it that way. And you'd have Bader as your platoon center fielder. But Is it likely to happen? No, absolutely not. So
Well, Easy said it in the chat. That the way we're talking, like Bader's sound like a wasted $10 million. No, because I think what Stern says, he values defense. He values run production. To to the run prevention is what he values that a lot. So the $10 million in our eyes might be a waste for Bader when you look at the lineup. But when you're looking at about run prevention, which he talked about a lot, it's money well spent. So I think that's where he's looking at with the bottom of the lineup, at least with Bader, is the run prevention aspect of it, because you can really say that the outfield defense is extremely good. I think Nimmo is going to be great in left field. Bader is a guy, if he's healthy, can have no problem with Citi Field outfield with his defense. And Marte is a solid, not great, but he's solid at right field, especially if he's healthy and he has a cannon for an arm. So, I think the outfield defense is fine. But Chris, let's get to the rotation, because we spoke about the bench and the lineup that goes hand in hand, so we can push that out of the way. But the rotation, I think the rotation 1 through 4 is set. Well, actually, let me put this another way. I think the rotation is set. The first 5 you see on your screen, I think, is the rotation. I think Tyler McGill and Joey Lucchesi has the best chance of maybe pushing one of the fifth starters, if it's Severino or Hauser. I don't think Severino or Hauser are going to be pushed out of the rotation. You gave Mania money, and Quintana is one of your probably trusted guys in your rotation. So I don't think they have much of a shot to make the rotation. But I think Tyler McGill and Joey Lucchesi, depending on who else is going to make. That's why I only put 6 guys in the projected bullpen, because of the fact that Mike Vaso double asterisk, because I think he has to be godly great, like outstanding to make the roster, because they're not going to put him in the bullpen as a long man. I think you're wasting him there, at least right now. But the rotation. Do you think that starting 5 is what it is going into the season?
Yeah, to start off the season, yeah. I don't think those guys are getting moved. I think Luis Severino is going to be a lot better than people give him credit for. So I think that you can even maybe slot him in at the 2 if he shows, he's capable after spring training, because I do think there's a lot of upside. I think someone said it in the chat earlier or on Twitter. Someone went as far as to say that he could be better than Kodai Senga. I'm not buying that. That's a lot. That's much for me. That's a little much, but he can definitely be the second best starting pitcher for the Mets if he resurges his career here in Queens. Nonetheless, that top 5 is set. And this is the conversation to be had of whether this team is going to be using a 5-man rotation or a 6-man rotation. But also, is that 6th man going to be a strict rotation spot, or is he going to be spot starting and being in the bullpen?
Well, what Carlos Mendoza said and David Stern says, because of the April schedule where they don't have a lot of off days, they'll probably pitch a 6th guy more frequently in April, because they don't have a lot of off days. I think they have 2 off days in April, maybe 3, which is not a lot to start the season. So you're gonna have to probably add that 6th man, and that's why I think he's probably gonna be one of the guys in the bullpen as a long man and get that start every now and then when they have 8, 9, 10 games in a row, and put that 6th man in to give guys an extra day's rest. And that's where I think Tyler McGill is probably going to win that. Again, whoever's pitching better, McGill or Lucchesi, I think is going to get that spot in the long relievers spot in the bullpen, and get that spot start as the 6th man probably 2 or 3 times in the month of April, because of the lack of days off. So, and who brought that up? I'm sorry, S-Man brought up a good point. Hauser can do both. He did pitch in a bullpen for the Brewers as well, and he did well. So
Mania, theoretically.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they like Mania in the rotation. I think he probably brings a lot more upside in the rotation than the bullpen. Hauser, if McGill pitches well, I could see Hauser going to the bullpen as the long man, and Tyler McGill be the 5th starter, which can be, we see what McGill can do when his stuff is on. And Hauser can get that 6th spot in the rotation when they need that sixth guy in the rotation because of the off days. But with this rotation, how do you feel about it if these are your starting five going into opening day, Chris?
I don't think we have a choice to feel any other way about it. I think this is going to be said like we just agreed on. I think like I said, the rotation is what it is. I think there's a lot of upside to this rotation. I think it has a potential to be a lot better than last year's rotation. I think that if we see what we're supposed to see out of Luis Severino and we see what he's been before in his career, and same thing with Sean Manaea, like, he was in his Oakland days, I think that we're going to be A-okay, to be honest with you.
Yep.
Adrian Hauser is a guy that's very consistent. He's shown that in his time in Milwaukee. Whether it's being a long man or whether it's being a true starter, he shows consistency. So I like that addition for the New York Mets. I think this is a very underrated staff, to be honest
I
with
agree.
you. And I know it's not sexy on paper because Sean Manaea has struggled over the last couple of seasons. I know Luis Severino has struggled and does have injury concerns. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this rotation is going to be the next best thing since sliced bread, because it could also fall the other way. We have injury-prone guys in Severino and Jose Quintana getting up there in age. We don't really know what Sean Manaea, has. We know he has the updated velocity, the increased velocity. We know he has a good off-speed arsenal, but is that going to play as well as it played in the latter half of the 2023 season? So there's a lot of wild card question marks. Really, I mean, this whole team is a wild card question mark, right? That's why they're going to be a potential wild card team. I think that fits the bill right there. But nonetheless, yeah, I'm actually feeling really confident, knowing and seeing how that rotation shook out in 2023. At the beginning of the 2023 season, we were excited, right? We had Senga, Verlander, Scherzer. We're like, dude, whatever we get out of 4 and 5 is great. Who cares? We have a great top three. And then we're like, what we saw in 2023 really disappointed us, and everything went wrong in the rotation. So that's why I think like my expectations were already very low with what I witnessed last season.
Yeah.
It can't get much worse than that at all.
Yeah.
So I'm expecting a big bounce back year, not only from Luis Severino, but Sean Manaea as well. I'm not going to be worried about Adrian Hauser. We know he's probably going to be hovering close to a 4 ERA. A 4.2 ERA. That's what he was in Milwaukee, and that's serviceable. That plays for a fifth man in the rotation. I like it. I like it a lot, Rob. I'm not going to lie to you.
And listen, the worst thing that happened to the Mets wasn't the Verlander out on opening day and out a month and Scherzer not being Scherzer. It was Jose Quintana, because you saw what happened when Quintana came back later in the season. And you only had basically two consistent starters in Senga and Quintana. And I know it really didn't matter wins or losses at that moment, but they were consistently giving your team a chance to win. And you saw the Mets play better when they knew every fifth day with those two guys, they were getting consistent starts and they gave their team a chance to win, which is what you need to ask for. And I said this, Hauser, I think is going to be consistent and going to go out there every fifth day, give you 5 innings, mostly, sometimes 6. He'll pitch a gem every now and then, and sometimes he'll pitch bad. He'll pitch you a little over a 4 ERA, which is fine for a fifth starter. No problem. Jose Quintana, if he is healthy, can pitch to a 3.5, 3.4, 3.5 ERA is perfectly fine. And I said this many times. If you get 3/5 of your rotation pitching every fifth day consistently with the health, you can go through a season, or at least half the season, with giving your team a chance to win. The Mets had one starter they can count on last year in the first couple of months, and they didn't have a starter go past the 6th inning until the middle of May. You can't have that. That's why the consistency is so important, and why I think with Kodai Senga, there's too many people underestimating Kodai Senga and what he did last year. In his first year in Major League Baseball, he struggled early on and got better later in the year. Usually it switches. Usually you're good in the beginning of the year because nobody has a book on him, and then you struggle later in the year. He did the exact opposite. He was the 3rd best ERA pitcher in baseball, in the National League, and 5th best in baseball ERA-wise. And yet we're calling him not an ace, which is ironic, because if anybody else that was not named Kodai Senga had a 2.98 ERA, as your top starter, they would call that pitcher an ace. But because it's his first year going into his second year, they're not considering him an ace. Yet he pitched like an ace with over 200 strikeouts. Yet he was top 5 in baseball in ERA, top 3 in the National League. Yet we're not talking about him like he's an ace, and that is not fair to him. That is not fair to him at all. If he pitches anywhere close to that, if not better, he's going to be one of the top pitchers in baseball just by what he's done with the high strike to over 200 strikeouts, under 3 ERA. There's not a lot of pitchers that do that. Yet we're not calling him an ace, which is not fair, because if you put a name like Garrett Cole, if you put a name like top starters, a Corbin Burns, of Freddie Peralta, if any of those pitchers you put a different name with Kodai Senga stats, you would call him an ace. But because it's Kodai Senga and going into his second year, they're not calling him an ace. And I think that's completely unfair, because if he pitches to what he did last year or close to it, how can you not consider him an ace? And if he does that, and Hauser is your fifth starter, consistent fifth starter, now you only need 1 out of the 3 to be there every fifth day and consistent. And now you're talking about a 350-year rotation that you trust in. And say if it's Quintana, Senga, and Hauser that are your most consistent pitchers every fifth day. That means if Minaya or Severino pitch okay and stay healthy, at least one of them, now you're talking about a rotation that is consistent every fifth day. And now that gives your team a chance to win every fifth day, which the Mets never had last year until it didn't matter in August and September. And I think that is extremely important going into the season, is that if we can get out of spring training healthy and 3/5 of the rotation give you every fifth day starts, consistency, now you're only talking about needing one more guy to just remain healthy and pitch every fifth day. Because if Minaya and Severino stay healthy, they're going to be perfectly fine. Not great, even though Severino has the potential to be a top of the line starter with his stuff.
Yeah.
Just be okay. And this rotation can go take this team a long way with a consistent year from this lineup, Chris.
To your point on Kodai Senga, want to give him all the props in the world. Not many pitchers in Major League Baseball in their rookie season. I understand the age factor. He was coming over a little bit late to the MLB, but nonetheless, as a rookie pitcher, getting used to not only the language barrier, but also just your teammates, the environmental conditions of an actual, outdoor facility, a different mound, different height, different length, all that good stuff. And to have inconsistency from the guys that were supposed to be consistent around you, and also not having your ace in Justin Verlander going down unexpectedly, to have to step up. And we saw him struggle very early on, Kodai Senga. With the walks, he held his own, but he struggled a little bit. But to have all those outside factors going against you in your first year and having to step up to eventually, knowing what we know what happened with Max Scherzer, be that ace, I cannot see how anybody in this fan base would not respect what he went out there and did. Let alone the numbers. Even if he pitched to even a full 1 ERA above, higher than what he pitched to last season, I would have still sat there and I would still be here to this day and been like, wow, that guy really saddled up and he just took it to everybody, given everything that was going against him. So shout out to Kodai Senga. A lot of people have to start putting respect on his name, as you said, Rob.
Yeah.
But also when I look at this, sorry, I was going to make my second point here. As it pertains, David Stearns has done something very, very unique here. And he's accounted for Sean Manaea and Severino and maybe even Jose Quintana, whether it's inconsistency from Manaea or Severino or whether it's injury from any one of those guys. He's accounted for that because now you have these bottom 2 names in Lucchesi and McGill. You even have Shintaro Fujinami, who can be used potentially. I know the numbers weren't pretty, but as a spot starter. You have these guys that can mitigate and fill in for those guys. Worst case scenario happening, like we saw last season. We didn't have that extended depth in the bullpen to mitigate the rotation when a guy like Tyler McGill, who was scheduled not to be in the rotation to start off 2023, had to be. Same thing with David Peterson, although I think David Peterson was because he had a hell of a spring training last season and he proved himself. But nonetheless, you now have immense depth for any one of these guys on the bottom of your screen, plus Jose Buto, who we don't even see on the screen,
Yep.
to fill in for any one of those guys, Quintana, Manaea, Severino, and Hauser, if things don't go wrong. And you still have guys right here in the roster possibilities category, especially Drew Smith, Phil Bickford, Sean Reed Foley, guys that we've already been accustomed to seeing.
Yep.
They're not even guaranteed roster spots. Like Drew Smith not being guaranteed a roster spot. That's masterful work from David Stearns to
Correct.
bring in all of these guys.
Yep.
Right? Offensively, it's a different story. We just went over that whole debacle. We talked about it for 55 minutes on why that can't be the case offensively. Right? But that is completely a different topic than the pitching side of the ball here. Because as the projected lineup directly relates to the projected bench offensively, this projected rotation, you're not talking about a 1 through 5 that is separated from the bullpen. These guys, there's a lot of intermingling between the rotation and the bullpen. That's what a lot of people don't realize. And David Stearns has done a phenomenal, near perfect job to foster that competition between the bullpen and the rotation and have guys that can do both.
Yeah, and you know what? He done that, and I talked about this when we were talking about Stearns possibly being the president of baseball ops, and then when he became the president of baseball ops, one thing I was always consistent with, I am not worried about David Stearns putting a pitching staff together, rotation or bullpen, because he's done it successfully year after year after year as GM of the Brewers. 6 out of his 8 years had a top 3 bullpen in baseball in his tenure. Pitching staff in general were top 5, 7 out of 8 years. That is huge. That is not a mistake. That is not, a little bit of luck. You don't do that for so many years out of your tenure and think it's an anomaly or it's just pure luck. He knows what he's doing. The reclamation projects that he's always brought with the Brewers, from rotation to bullpen, somehow, some way, if it's analytics or telling them to throw a pitch more than another pitch or just certain mechanics, he seems to have a philosophy with his coaching staff and just the pure analytics that's showing what works well with these pitchers, and they become successful. I'm not saying every one of these guys are going to be successful. If that does, then we're talking about a whole different Mets team. But to have them be consistent enough, and I think this bullpen is perfectly fine, because all you need is one of the guys that are reclamation projects in his bullpen, because you already got Diaz, you already got Raley, you already got Ottavino and Diekman, who are probably guys that are pretty solid in your bullpen. If you have one of these guys like Fujinami, like a Lopez, maybe a Bickford, Tonkin, or Foley, Garrett, Walker, one of these guys to step up. Now you're talking about 4 guys, not including Diaz, that are going to be solid in your bullpen. And now you're only talking about 1 or 2 guys that are going to get, a pitch in the 5th inning if a starter doesn't go deep, or pitch in the 6th inning if a guy only goes 5 innings. So the Mets have so many options in the bullpen, which is exactly what he's done his entire tenure with the Brewers, with the bullpen. Always having guys ready to go from the farm in the bullpen, and ready to go in the back end of the bullpen or in the middle relief that can go anywhere, that has versatility, and in the minor leagues, where if somebody's not performing, there's somebody else that can step right in that spot and fill that role. And the versatility is extremely important. Jorge Lopez could be 8th inning guy, but even if he's not, even if he's average at best, he could still be your 6th inning guy, because you can put Raley, Diekman, maybe even Fujinami as guys that can be your bridge to Diaz. There's so many options, which is why I think they're going to go more with matchups than giving guys set roles. which I like more. Besides Diaz being your closer, every other guy is probably going to be matchup oriented. If they believe that in the 8th inning that there's 3 left-handers, you might see Rayleigh or Diekman in that spot. If there's a couple of right-handers that might struggle with power arms, you might see Lopez and Fujinami late in games. And I think that the versatility is outstanding. And look at the roster possibilities just for the bullpen. And the bullpen, the 6 guys that you see, I think is a guarantee to make the opening day roster, the bullpen. I didn't put Drew Smith in there because I think there's a chance he might get either traded late in spring or just cut in general. I think a lot of teams are going to like a guy like Drew Smith because of his arm. Because he got a lot of talent in that arm. He just can't harness it for whatever reason. And maybe some other team can figure it out. You might get a bag of balls for Drew Smith. Maybe you'll get, like a lower level minor leaguer for Drew Smith because he can jump in a bullpen on a lot of teams. And if somebody fixes him, great, you got to steal. But Tonkin, Bickford, who we've seen a lot late in the season. I think Phil Bickford is a guy, and I know a lot of people didn't like him. I think, Chris, I don't think you're a big fan of his, but
No,
Bickford has good stuff. And that trade late in the year or at the deadline for from the Dodgers, he pitched pretty decent. And I think he's a guy that I think has a jump over a Smith, over a Tonkin, over a Foley, even a Garrett or Walker. Or even a Hartrick for that matter. I think he can be a guy that can probably be the 7th guy. Now, the 8th spot in this bullpen, which is probably the final spot in the bullpen that we're really going to get into with this, is it going to be a Tyler McGill or a Joey Lucchesi? Or are they going to go with a Smith or a Tonkin or a Foley? What do you think they're going to leave that last spot in the bullpen for? A long man? Because Fujinami can be a long man if you really need him to be. If they think Fujinami can be a guy that can come in the 8th inning as a bridge, or a guy that, our starter got destroyed. He's out in the 3rd inning. Fujinami can pitch you 3 innings, no problem. So are they going to just keep McGill and Lucchesi in the minors, or use that last spot as a long man for one of those guys I talked about?
Well, there's a couple different options here, and I think if we have 13, the rules saying we have 13 available, pitchers, right, that you can have on the roster max. Yeah. You got the 5 rotation guys, and you'd honestly have 2 bullpen spots here, because you'd have 8 available bullpen guys instead of just a 6. Meech over here saying a great point, saying he thinks Fujinami has options, so he wouldn't be surprised if the Mets started him off in AAA to tweak some stuff and then brought him up. That could be a thing, and I could see that happening too, which would provide a lot of these other names that may not have options associated with them, a different sort of route. But nonetheless, if those guys are consistent and these guys are the guys, the top 6, you need a long man, right? If we're saying that we're going to get a 6-man rotation and spot starts predominantly in April, maybe even going into May to mitigate Kodai Senga and some other guys in terms of keeping them fresh, then you're going to have to go and give Tyler McGill, Joey Lucchesi, or Jose Butto the shot, right? I think that Tyler McGill and Joey Lucchesi probably are going to be competing for that. And I wouldn't be surprised if Jose Butto is the odd man out and we see him back in the minor leagues, getting called up throughout the season like we saw him last season. But for me, the question is, now we know the competition is going to exist there between McGill and Lucchesi. Who's going to be that 8th bullpen guy? Who's going to be that guy? Because that's where you talk about Tonkin. For me personally, that's where you talk about Tonkin, Bickford, and Smith. And no, I'm not high on Phil Bickford, but I agree with you. He had a very DJ Stewart-esque type run to end last season, right? We saw him in a lot more bulk innings. He was basically going in there to eat up a lot of innings. We know the Mets starting pitchers really did struggle. And at the end of the season, when the Mets basically had given up already on the season, they wanted to mitigate any further injuries to anybody that was going to be appearing in the 2024 season for them. And they decided to basically use Phil Bickford as that guy to clean up the innings. So mad props to him. Hopefully he gets his chance, and he will in spring. Not sure what his future holds. Michael Tonkin is very interesting to me because he is a very big junk ball guy. I
Yep.
like the movement on his off-speed pitches. The same could have been said for Austin Adams. I think Austin Adams is back. I'm not sure if he's on the 40-man
They brought him
roster,
back. Yeah, they
but he
released
cleared waivers, right? So he did,
correct, and
yeah.
then they got
Okay,
him
so
back.
he
Yeah,
did get brought back. I see some people saying Yohan Ramirez. They're very high on him in terms of his upside and potential. Like right now, we're talking about early bullpen guys that will be that cleanup type guy if the starter can't go 4 innings or even 5 innings. This is going to be your 5th inning guy where you just need an inning out of him or maybe 2 to sort of mop up that debacle of the game that the starter went through and did. They're not going to be holding it down like these top 6 guys or top 5 guys, whatever you think was going to happen to Fujinami are. So this is a very good problem to have, and it does become a very interesting point. Because he is a familiar face and because he does have the stuff, I think that Drew Smith, as we go into spring training, probably is going to project as being that
yeah,
most likely guy, right? But if he goes out there and struggles in spring training, right, this is a guy that the Mets decided to tender this offseason, right? If they didn't believe in him, they wouldn't have tendered him. So that's why I think he has the leg up. But if he can't get it figured out in spring training, I think you're right. He might be out of here. He might truly be out of here because you send him to an organization like the Rays, maybe
yeah,
even the Astros. You know that we all know that those 2 teams fix relievers up like it's nothing, like it's no problem.
yep,
And you can get whatever you get from him at that point is what you get from him. Listen, Drew Smith, he needs to start locating his slider and he needs to start locating that fastball. He has an electric fastball up to 98 miles per hour, but he leaves it middle. He gets it ahead of a lot of counts, but dudes take him deep because he leaves it right over the middle of the plate.
yep, yep.
So I'm not questioning the stuff that he has. I'm questioning the location, which has been a problem for him consistently. But if I had to guess, he would be that sort of favorable option as we head into spring training. But anything can happen. Like I said, going back to the beginning of this stream, um, we have like 4 roster spots, 5 roster spots that there's going to be competition for. So that's going to make spring training a lot better to watch and a lot more enjoyable to watch because now we have something to look forward to. We know the guys like a Brandon Nimmo, Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso. We're not going to be seeing much of them. But these guys who are duking it out for these back end roster spots are very important. But I will say on the flip side, to play devil's advocate, let's take what we see in spring training as a grain of salt. We saw David Peterson had a great spring training last season. We saw what happened in the regular season with him.
Correct.
We saw Abraham Almonte ripping the cover off the ball. I talk about a name that you probably don't remember, most of you guys in the chat probably. Abraham Almonte killed it last season. And I was like, dude, this guy could really be on the bench. This guy could be something. He didn't make it.
Yep.
So we gotta tone down sort of our, I guess, not expectations, right? These guys still have to go out there and perform. But a lot of like, if these guys do catch fire in spring training, take it with a grain of salt. But like I said, I'm not trying to take away from the enjoyment here. There's going to be competition. It's going to be healthy competition, especially on the pitching side of the ball.
Yep.
David Stearns has done a great job in his first year with let's say limited resources. We all know what he has to work with money-wise with Steve Cohen in his wallet. He didn't have that full arsenal monetarily this offseason for one reason or another, the payroll or whatever, what have you. But all things considered, Rob, when we look at this offseason in a nutshell, with what he had available to him, I think he made out pretty well, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think they are saving. They have enough. They're gonna have a ton of money ready to go to add to this payroll if it's worthy at the deadline. That's why I talked about looking at the first half and not looking at anywhere after August 1st. Look before August 1st, from March 28th to August, a little bit before August 1st. That's where you got to look at. I think what he had to work with, I think he's done very well. It's not great, but it could be. if guys work out, it could be, there's a lot of things I like about it. There's some things I don't like about it. We talked about the lineup. I think the bullpen's going to be fine. The rotation can be consistent, very consistent, especially at the back end with Hauser. And, you have Senga, who's consistent, and Quintana, who's healthy, is just a veteran who's consistent. So we'll see. And I look like Lucas Duda. Hey, Duda hit 3 home runs in a game, so I'm good. I'll take that every day
I
of the
look
week.
like Steven Matz, apparently. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if
Listen,
that's
I do not advertise throwing home in a World Series like Duda. I promise you I wouldn't have made that mistake. Okay? I promise you. So I might look like him, but I guarantee you I would have thrown a strike to home plate. And maybe it would have changed the trajectory of the Mets in 2015. But let's digress on that. God, I can't talk about that. But speaking about Almonte, and this is why I got very upset about last year, guys who deserve to make the roster, like Brett Beatty, who didn't. I'll never forget. I was in the burn with the 7 line in right field, and Almonte was raking in the first game. Just like everybody's like, why would you get a former Brave? That guy can be a bench player. Like he was raking. He made a couple of nice catches in that first game. He was like having fun with the guy, all of us in the right field berm, just having fun, enjoying life, playing a great game, and he had a really good spring. Yet he didn't make the roster. And was it Billy Epler just going with his veterans, which he did a lot, Buck with his veterans? Beatty outperformed Escobar. Escobar could have started on the bench, and Beatty could have started, and I think that hurt Beatty going into 2023, not making a team when he basically destroyed the ball and was actually pretty good defensively in spring as well, and didn't get the nod, and he started in AAA. Same thing with Almonte. He was basically non-existent at all in this organization. It's a joke.
Yep.
So, last thing that we're going to talk about before we end this stream, we talked about 4 or 5 roster spots, right? We think the bench and the lineup is pretty much set if this is the roster, or at least the offensive possibilities are going to be going into opening day. Give me the names that you think are going to make the team to put that 26-man ready to go for opening day against Milwaukee. What do you think?
I think projected lineup stays as is. I think the bench stays as is. I think the rotation 1 through 5 stays as is. Projected bullpen, I'll say, stays as is in the top 6, and I think really the only 2 things we need to fill in is the next 2 guys in the bullpen. I'm leaning toward. Man, it really is tough. I'm leaning toward Joey Lucchesi being in the bullpen as that long guy.
Okay.
I'm leaning Joey Lucchesi, and I'm leaning Drew Smith. I think you have already a good combination of lefty righties. Although 2 lefties in the bullpen, right? If you add a third, does that make a whole lot of sense? But like I said, that 7th man in the bullpen, because he is the long man, right? You can just think of him as an extension of the rotation. So I don't think he really has anything to do with the bullpen. So if that's the case and he has nothing to do with the actual bullpen, we're just talking 6-man rotation, I'm giving it to Joey Lucchesi.
Okay.
But in that scenario, you can have Joey Lucchesi and Tyler McGill make the roster.
You could.
You can do that. You can certainly do that.
Yeah,
but what I think really happens is whoever wins that job between Tyler McGill and Joey Lucchesi are going to be that long man. I'm going to give it to Lucchesi. I like what Lucchesi has to offer. I like the curve. I mean, I think it's a pretty decent pitch. I like the way he looked to end 2023, coming back from that, I believe it was Tommy John surgery. I liked everything about it. I liked everything about his season. So give me Joey Lucchesi. I think he rounds it out. And the last guy, I got to go with Drew Smith. I think that he's going to get his last chance. I think that especially if he produces in spring training, right? If he doesn't, then it's a separate conversation.
Yeah.
But I think that he finally figures it out. And I think he finally shows that he can locate the pitch. He can locate his pitches and strike batters out and finish those 0-2, 1-2 counts that he loves to get himself into. But he just can't finish it out because he can't locate. How many times have we seen Drew Smith go 0-2, 1-2 on a guy? Then batters foul a couple off, it gets to 3-2. He either walks them or gives up a bomb. It's a
Yep.
lot of times for Drew Smith over the last couple of
Yep.
years. So I think I'm going to go everything remaining consistent here. And out of the roster possibilities, adding on to the two projected bullpen guys, give me Joey Lucchesi and give me Drew Smith.
All right, so Lucchesi and Smith for Chris. Yeah, I think the lineup in the bench and the rotation is basically set unless there's a move, free agency wise with a bat. I think right now that's what I think is really set if we don't acquire nobody else. But yeah, the two guys I'm gonna go with Tyler McGill because I think Tyler McGill is more of a David Stearns guy, power arm. Lucchesi, gets a short end of the stick. I think the Mets really like Joey Lucchesi. I always thought they wanted him in the rotation a couple of years ago, but it's a new regime. Stearns didn't bring in Lucchesi as a free agent. So I don't know where he sees Lucchesi at. I think he really likes Tyler McGill. He brought it up in a couple of his comments when he spoke to the media a couple of times this offseason. The last bullpen spot. So I think the Tyler McGill is going to get that long man role in the bullpen and occasionally start in April when you don't get the off days. I'm going with Drew Smith as well because I think because of his stuff and potential, you talked about it. He always got ahead in counts. He always got the 0-2, 1-2. Then he started to nitpick and started to use his secondary stuff where he should be using his fastball a little bit more and learn that location with that fastball. Because when you could throw 97, 98, 99, you need to locate your fastball a little bit better. There should be no reason why you aren't throwing that pitch letter higher and above because these guys love swinging that high fastball. I think because of the stuff that Drew Smith has and maybe the new lab and maybe changing his mechanics and telling him to throw a certain pitch more and throw that slider a little bit less, even though the slider is very good, but he hangs it too much. Maybe it's, getting lazy with his arm and getting under that slider where it's basically a Frisbee going up to the plate. He has no problem getting into favorable counts. He has problems putting that guy away, like you said, Chris. But in my opinion, the two spots for the quote-unquote bullpen, in my opinion, Tyler McGill, because of that potential that he has, and Drew Smith. Now, obviously, performance will dictate that regarding if McGill and Lucchesi don't pitch well, or at least if it's flip-flop, and maybe Buto pitches better than both of them, he gets the long man role in the rotation. I didn't put Buto there because I think that they like him in the minors as like that next guy up out of the minors, just as like a doubleheader type start. Like if it's a doubleheader, throw him out there. Maybe because you can add that extra guy on the roster for a doubleheader. I think he'll be a guy that they'll just throw up there as well. But yeah, I think it's going to be Drew Smith and Tyler McGill to fill out that roster. And again, this is our opinions. Performance is going to dictate everything in spring training, obviously, Chris.
I think so. I'm trying to figure out. I'm not seeing the latest article on Joey Lucchesi, whether he has options remaining or not. I would assume probably not, but I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me. Tyler McGill definitely does have options still. So if Lucchesi doesn't, after we end this stream, I'll go and try to solidify that notion. I'll try to get that fact down, but. That's why I was kind of leaning Joey Lucchesi because I know Tyler McGill does have options left. Quite frankly, I think with the new pitch that Tyler McGill is working on as well, that might be a good chance for him to start in AAA. I believe it's a split finger fastball to sort of get that down pat if that's going to be in his regular repertoire moving forward. And Kodai Senga alluded to the fact that he had a lot of questions. I believe it was him for Mr. Kodai Senga about that split finger fastball or I believe that's what it was. But anyways, you know what I'm trying to get at. Tyler McGill could start. I think he has better stuff than Joey Lucchesi overall. I think he has the higher upside. But just given that McGill has options and he's still trying to work on that pitch, that newly renowned splitter or whatever that we haven't seen before, that could be the perfect way to start him off in AAA and then bring him up. And also, Joey Lucchesi did get tendered as well. This is a guy that I believe came to a contract agreement for about $1.5 million with the Mets. He was a non-tender candidate, and they brought him back. So that gives me a little bit of confidence in terms of Stearns seeing something with him moving forward, even though he's not a David Stearns guy and he didn't bring him in here. So that's all outside things to take into consideration. And this whole stream has been, outside factors to take into consideration when we talk about these competitions. Just to circle back on this before we end the stream, one more question just to you, Rob. I want to get your thoughts and opinions, like clearly and bluntly. Do you believe this front office and this coaching staff right now with the roster shaking out, if there are no upgrades offensively, do you think that there is a true competition at third base, even though they're saying so? You,
I think there is. I
you think
think
there is? Okay.
they've been throwing. Now they haven't been showing Vientos in the cage. They've been showing Vientos a lot working out on the field with Lindor or just doing drills. Doing the pepper drill. If you play baseball, you know what that is. He's done. That's all they've been showing. I think they actually would prefer Vientos at third base. I don't know why. I think because they've been shoving it down our throats with all these videos of him working out with Lindor defensively, doing defensive drills at third base, having a third base glove, not a first base glove at all. All you've seen him doing is drills at third base and working out at third base. I think there truly is a third base competition because I don't think they trust Beatty at all with the bat. I think if you can get Vientos to be serviceable at third base, they like his bat more, and they probably trust his bat more consistently if he plays every day. Beatty was consistent playing every day, and he didn't perform. At least Vientos, when he got started and getting a lot of games in a row consistently offensively, his bat showed up. So I think the competition at third base is more real than we probably put out there in this stream because of the fact of how they're shoving it down our throats through social media with Vientos all this time. So, Chris, I wanted to ask you one thing before we end the stream and say our final thoughts. Question for you.
Sure.
One shock roster open, one surprise guy to, because there's always a surprise in spring training that might make the roster that nobody thought of. If it's not the guys on the roster possibilities, now there might be a few open 40-man roster spots depending on cuts, moving guys to 60-day ILs and all that. If there's one guy to make the opening day roster, it doesn't have to be on this list. Somebody you're thinking of, who is that surprise that makes the roster on opening day?
Can he be on this list?
No, it can be somebody that's not on the list, that's not even on the 40-man, but might get put on the 40-man because of his outstanding performance in spring training.
I know it's not likely, so I would want to say Drew Gilbert, but I'm gonna go with a guy that you know what? No, I don't. No, that would take away all my credibility. I'm not gonna say that name. I will say a lot of people are down on him, and he's still very young. We haven't talked about his name at all because none of these lists even have him in the top 20 anymore, and he was in almost cracking top 10.
I think
You
I
know
know
who
who
I'm going with.
I think I know.
Well, I'm gonna say his name anyways. Alex Ramirez. We did see
Yep,
him.
I thought you were going to say that. Yep.
Yeah, Alex Ramirez is a name that I definitely would watch out for this spring. A lot of people are down on him. I'm not saying he's gonna make I think he's on 40 man. I'm not saying he's gonna make the 26 man at all. All I'm saying is that what do you do with Alex Ramirez, who's been here for the last couple seasons in this farm system? Everyone's had high expectations, and he goes out there and has put together a couple of subpar seasons. I'm still high on the kid. But you have to wonder, he's 20 years old. He's 21 years old. His time is dwindling. I don't know. There's this outfield with the revamp of this farm system. You have Ryan Clifford there now. You have Drew Gilbert to come up and be those guys to come up for the outfield. Where does that put Alex Ramirez? That's a name to watch out for this spring training to see what he does. Another name, the guys, Frank, Henry, and somebody else before. offensive player, Tomas Nido. We haven't seen him at all in these discussions. I simply think it's going to be Omar Narvaez, one, because I think he's a better hitter flat out than Tomas Nido. But I also think that lefty righty with Francisco Alvarez is going to be something that's a key factor as well in terms of having those matchups and that lefty on the bench. But also, lastly, to round it out, it's a long-winded answer. I don't think Alex Ramirez is going to make the 26 man. I think if anybody is likely to make the 26 man that is in the minor leagues right now and that's projected to start in the minor leagues, I would think it'd be Mike Vasil. I think it'd be Mike Vasil.
So
So
you did steal my thunder. I was gonna say Alex Ramirez because
yeah,
I was
yeah.
very high on him a couple of years ago. I was gonna say that, and I knew as soon as you started to say it, and you said Drew Gooden, and then you were like, let me just go somewhere else. I knew it was gonna be Alex Ramirez. You did steal my thunder on that, but yeah, I agree. I think Alex Ramirez has a lot to prove. He was in the top 10 not too long ago. I know the farm system wasn't great at the time, but he has the potential to have a ton of power. He could play all three outfield positions, and he has an outstanding glove. I watched him on the backfields last year actually, just doing defensive drills. The guy took 10 fly balls, and it wasn't just regular pop-ups, like little line drives running gap to gap. He played left, center, and right during this drill. And whoever was hitting the balls to him, this poor guy was just running. I couldn't believe how much he was running. And he was just playing great. But the bat was very inconsistent. And his strikeouts are extremely high, but he has a ton of power. He's very skinny, but he's starting to develop like a Ronnie Mauricio body right now. If you haven't seen a picture of him, Google
Not
Alex Ramirez. His latest picture, Ronnie Mauricio was a skinny dude a couple of years ago, and they didn't
right.
think he was going to fill out body-wise. Projected him to be a shortstop is probably not his body type. Ronnie Mauricio is more of a third base body type now. Alex Ramirez, I think, is probably projecting to be more of a corner outfielder now because of his body type, which is very helpful for this team that might have Marte not on his team next year, be the right fielder until maybe Clifford pops up out of nowhere. But Alex Ramirez is a guy that I think can be sneaky good if he can work on them strikeouts. He has a ton of power, and he has bulked up. This guy out of nowhere. I remember him last year. He wasn't as skinny as he was in like 2020 and 2021. He bulked up. He is building body type wise like Ronnie Mauricio, but much taller. So it's going to be very interesting to see about Alex Ramirez.
He impressed me last spring training, so that's why I haven't forgotten about him. And everybody is writing him off. A lot of people don't. These lists don't even have him in the top 20 anymore. I don't even think
Yeah.
for the Mets organization because they think he's slid off so far. But we're talking about before this going into 2023. I believe he was ranked as high as the number 11 prospect, if I remember correctly. So yeah, definitely haven't forgot about him. He's on the 40 man, I believe. So I want to see what he has. We have a couple other veteran guys here that Ricardo's saying in the chat. I haven't heard much of Jose Iglesias' name in terms of updates.
Oh, right. They
He
did
got a
get him.
minor league contract with an invitation to spring training. Trace Thompson, same thing. So all these guys, these journeymen, are going to be vying for those spots. And like I said, this is spring training. It's not likely, even if they do well, that they're scheduled to make this opening 26 man roster. We saw it with Abraham Almonte, perfect example. The Shane Sons boys said Consuerga, I forgot his first name, but last season that was killing in spring training as well, looked very good, and he didn't get a crack at it either. So, like I said, take it with a grain of salt. It should be a good spring training. These guys that we're saying up here, I want to see how these kids do. Basil, Gilbert, Williams, Alex Ramirez, Acuna. Like, this is going to be a very fun spring training, but for these journeymen, like a Jose Iglesias, like a Trace Thompson and any other maybe journeyman reliever or starter that may appear for the Mets in spring training, even if they do really well, just take it with a grain of salt because they're not going to be prioritized if I had to guess. But anyways, yes, Stanley
Family, yeah.
Consuegra. Yes, Henry. I like it. Listen, before I remember Abraham Almonte, but I didn't even think to remember Consuegra before I believe Keith from Shane Sons was talking about it in a space, and I was like, that just last year. Like these names, they go by us unless you're like Rob and you go to spring training almost every single season. Like these names, they pass you by as soon as the season
Yep.
starts and it ends. Like you don't remember who was killing it last season in spring training if they're not a household name. So yeah, that's my whole point. But yeah, I do have to bounce out of here very shortly. I got my own basketball game tonight. Yes, I am in a men's league. Yes, I'm still trying to live out my dream of playing some professional sports. I'm just kidding. It's a very rec league-ish type thing. But it was a great conversation. I'm really happy we did this. I've just been staring at this graphic on my background for this whole entire stream going on an hour 45 here. It's beautiful. Baseball's back. I love it. I hope the chat is pumped, regardless of how well or how poorly you think the Mets are going to do this season. I hope just the thought of baseball being back excites everybody because it is America's pastime for a reason. I love the game, and I hope everyone shares our same passion. So,
Absolutely. And Chris, and if anybody goes to spring training or thinks about going to spring training, I just wanted to bring this up. You talked about I go almost every year. I've been going ever since 2018 when I actually was able to get down there frequently. Go 9 a.m. They open up the backfields for the players to work out. They start walking out, going onto all these backfields, the prospects, the lower level prospects, like lower level minor leagues, the journeymen. All those guys are in the backfields working out, doing drills, batting practice, pitching, all that stuff. It's the best time to have conversations with these players. They will come up to you and talk to you. It's an awesome thing. They open up at 9 o'clock most. I think they just started. I think tomorrow is the first day they open up 9 a.m. the backfields. So you can walk around the whole facility, check out all the new cool things. Steve Cohen does a tremendous job putting up all these new fields, fixing them, all these new labs. You'll see all these pitching machines. It's crazy. So check it out. If you go to spring training, go to the backfields, wake up early, get breakfast, go there. You can walk for I think you can walk until I think 11 or 12 p.m. and it's hot. Bring some water, but it's a lot of fun. You get to see the media there as well. So it's really cool. Me and Hayden walked right into freaking Andy Martino, right in
Rob,
front of us.
I know this season's probably just a long shot in terms of me getting down there. But if you want to plan something next season for spring
Yeah.
training, I'd be more than happy to go. I'm definitely interested. I've never been, but that's something that I definitely want to do. So
Well, just so you know, and Grant's going to be there, so I'm definitely going to see Grant in the backfields. But yeah, Chris, I might be down living in Florida next year. So again, if you don't want to go get a hotel, I'll have plenty of room. Trust me when I tell you.
boom, let's
So
do
with
it.
that
I
said,
love it.
Chris, final thoughts so you can go play your basketball and score 40
Yeah.
tonight. Let everybody know on your channel what you're going to do with your channel in the next coming days.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely planning something cool for my channel. I'm trying to get something. I've been mentioning it to other people. Rob, I wanted to mention it to you as well. If you
Mhm.
wanted to co-host this thing with me as well, that'd be great. I wanted to
Cool.
do like maybe a day before actual opening day, March 27th, the night of. Maybe we do like a Mets content creator open panel where just content
That would be
creators
cool.
cycle in and out, and we just get everybody's scoop on their channel about the season coming up. Everyone's gonna be excited tomorrow or March 27th. The next day would be opening day. So that's something I want to get together, but we can definitely plan that behind the scenes. Other than that, True Mets Talk podcast, looking to have a lot more guests on. Obviously, going to be up here with Rob pretty regularly moving forward for the Mets Hot Stove Lives. As we head into the spring training, we can call it Mets Spring Training Lives, but nonetheless, a lot of good content. If you're a Knicks fan, if you happen to like basketball, like me, Knicks content on the channel as well, go check it out. True Knicks Talk and True Mets Talk. Interstate Mets Report, great live stream with some other Mets content creators. I'm trying to get other content creators on my channel to give everybody a diverse perspective because I know everyone can sit here and listen to me talk till I'm blue in the face, but I really enjoy getting ideas of what other people think about the teams that I like to talk about. So that's what's going to be happening on my channel. Just past 500 subscribers at around 510, 511, somewhere around there right now. I definitely appreciate the support. About 10 months into doing this whole YouTube thing, it's been a grind, but it's my passion. So I definitely appreciate everyone's support along the way. And shout out the chat for being here continuously. We definitely wouldn't be doing this without you all. So I definitely appreciate it. And as always, let's go Mets.
Absolutely. And, there's a lot of great Mets content creators out there. No matter if you like some, don't like some, they all work hard to bring the content to you guys. I mean, nobody does not work hard for their content. It's not easy. Trust me. to get where I am. I never thought I would. To get, I told Chris early on, the hardest is to get to 500, and then once you get to 1,000, you start to spread out more, and that's when you really start to, get noticed and everything like that. But having people, different diverse people on your channel is always important, because some people might be following somebody else and don't know you, and oh wow, look at this guy, he knows his shit. That's what happened to me. I didn't really have anybody. There was only like 4, maybe 5 content creators, and there's over 10 now. And that's because people see one person doing it, and wow, I can do this. I know what I'm talking about, and it grows. So it's important to have relationships with other content creators. We might not have great, different. We might always have difference of opinions, but everybody gets respected because of the fact that if somebody knows their stuff, like it's obvious, right? I wouldn't have you on my channel or anybody else if I didn't believe you guys know what you're talking about. Like, nobody's perfect. Everybody has difference of opinions. We don't agree on everything, but guess what? I respect your opinions, and that's all we can talk about is respecting everybody's opinions, even in the chat. So, Chris, I always appreciate that. Score 40 tonight. Have a great night, guys. Roster projections, our opinions. Lucchese and Drew Smith. I said Tyler McGill and Drew Smith, and Alex Ramirez is the guy to watch for possibly making an opening day roster. Hasn't been talked about enough. With that said, let's go Mets. Have a great night, Chris. It's always a pleasure. Have a good night, buddy. In the chat, have a great night. Let's go Mets. See you next time, guys. Good night.
Let's go Mets.